If every birthday party, fundraiser, sports league, and social event comes with a bigger price tag, what happens then? Suddenly, the down payment wasn't the issue anymore. The issue was whether they could comfortably live the life attached to that house. Why can lending money to family or splitting a dinner bill feel like a high stakes gamble? It starts with a simple request. A sibling needs help with a down payment. A close friend asks you to split a vacation villa or cover a large group dinner tab. Or a cousin is short on cash this month and promises to pay you back by Friday. Your instinct is to say yes. You want to be generous. You want to be helpful. But mixing dollars with dynamic relationships is one of the quickest ways to change the energy in a room. Suddenly, casual get-togethers feel tense. Venmo requests go unanswered, and a gesture made out of love quietly turns into an unspoken burden. Hi, I'm Larry Sprung with Midland Financial, and I want to be very careful about how I frame this because the goal today isn't to tell you to stop being a generous friend or a supportive family member. Generosity is a beautiful thing, but there is a massive difference between supporting someone you care about and putting your own financial circumstances or the relationship itself in jeopardy. When we don't set clear boundaries, we quietly cross the line from helping to enabling, or from a close bond to a silent resentment. Today, we're walking through how mixing money and relationships carries a much higher risk than most people realize, how a lack of structure turns simple loans or shared expenses into hidden emotional minefields, and exactly how to build healthy, respectful boundaries. And I'll be sure to share a story along the way about a client who wanted to help their daughter Emily buy her dream home. There was just one problem. They were short on the down payment. A client came to us a few years ago with what seemed like a simple question. I'll call him Mark. His daughter Emily and son-in-law Ryan had found a beautiful home in a good neighborhood, excellent schools, on tree-lined streets, the kind of place every parent dreams of seeing their children raise a family. There was just one problem. They were short on the down payment. Mark was in a position to help, and as any parent would, his first instinct was immediate. Of course, your mother and I will be happy to help. He loved his daughter, wanted his grandchildren in a safe neighborhood. Heck, he even enjoyed hanging out with his son-in-law. To him, the decision felt obvious, but helping is rarely as simple as writing a check. So when he came to us to withdraw the money, we asked a few questions. Could Emily and Ryan afford the house without your help? The answer was no. Could they comfortably afford the property taxes? Mark said maybe. What about maintenance, the higher utility bills? The answer became less certain. Then we asked a question nobody had considered. What happens after they move in? The room got quiet because that's where the real conversation started. You see, when people buy a home, they're not just buying a house, they're buying a neighborhood, a lifestyle, a set of expectations. If the neighbors are all driving luxury SUVs, what happens when your family is driving an older car? If the kids at school are wearing designer clothes, taking expensive vacations, and carrying the latest phones, how much pressure will there be to keep up? If every birthday party, fundraiser, sports league, and social event comes with a bigger price tag, what happens then? Suddenly, the down payment wasn't the issue anymore. The issue was whether they could comfortably live the life attached to that house. A few weeks later, Mark came back. He had a long conversation with Emily, not about the house, about the future, about what they wanted life to feel like. Did they want every extra dollar tied up in a mortgage? Did they want to feel pressure every time property taxes increased? Did they want to spend the next 20 years trying to keep up with the neighborhood around them? Or did they want choices? room to breathe. Emily and Ryan eventually bought a different home, not because they couldn't afford the bigger one, because they realized they didn't want the life that came with it. A few months later, Mark told me something that stuck with me. He said, "I thought I was helping my daughter get into a better house. I almost helped her get into a life she couldn't afford." That's the lesson. Financial boundaries aren't always about saying no. Sometimes they're about caring enough to ask the uncomfortable questions before the money leaves your account. They're about slowing down long enough to ask better questions, because the goal isn't to help someone get more. The goal is to help them build a life that they'll actually enjoy living. Let's jump into point one, the hidden cost of generosity. When a friend or family member asks for financial help, we usually look at our bank accounts to see if we have the cash. But we rarely calculate the statistical risk. The reality is that informal loans rarely go strictly according to plan. A comprehensive study by Bankrate found that nearly half, 44% of people who provided financial assistance to a loved one experienced negative consequences. Even more telling, 38% of those lenders actually lost money, and nearly a quarter watched the relationship suffer direct damage. This isn't just about large formal loans either. It happens at the restaurant table or on a group trip. According to a Lending Tree survey, more than a third of people who either borrowed or loaned money to a loved one reported negative outcomes, ranging from hurt feelings to a complete drop in communication. The numbers are telling us something very clear. When we lend money without a strategy, we aren't just risking our dollars, we are risking our people. So, what can you do about it? Well, first, before agreeing to a loan, look beyond your immediate cash flow and evaluate your emotional and financial risk. Since nearly half of informal lenders experience negative consequences, ask yourself if you can afford to treat the money as a gift rather than a loan. If losing that money or experiencing a delayed repayment will cause you stress or resentment, it's a sign that the risk to your peace of mind is too high. Next, don't rely on informal, unspoken agreements, even for small amounts, because a significant portion of casual lending leads to hurt feelings and dropped communication. Establish clear, upfront expectations before any money changes hands. Discuss timelines, boundaries, and what happens if plans change, ensuring both parties are on the same page to prevent misunderstandings later on. And lastly, be sure to establish boundaries for casual expenses. Be proactive during everyday social situations like group trips or dinners where a third of the people report negative outcomes from casual lending. Set explicit boundaries around how shared bills will be handled ahead of time. Use split payment apps in the moment or establish a pay-as-you-go rule to prevent small, unpaid favors from turning into long-term relationship strain. Point 2. Should you even be lending family or friends money to begin with? The moment you start finding financial success, chances are that a family or friend will ask for a loan. On one hand, stepping in as the lender can be an incredibly rewarding chapter in your family story. It can launch a loved one's dream venture, help them build credit, and teach invaluable life lessons about financial accountability. There's even a hidden silver lining with the IRS, because if you structure it legally and they happen to default, you can actually claim the loss to offset your future taxes. But beneath the surface of a seemingly noble deed lies a minefield of emotional and financial risks. The dark side of personal lending is that it can permanently fracture relationships, often driving a borrower to completely ghost you out of sheer shame and guilt when they can't pay. Worse, well-meaning loans often turn into a toxic safety net that enables chronic financial immaturity, keeping adult children from ever facing reality. It also poses a quiet threat to your own future, as younger generations often mistake a healthy savings account for endless wealth, not realizing that dipping into it can severely compromise their parents' retirement. Even the government watches closely. If you fail to charge the proper federal interest rate, you run right into an IRS gift tax trap. To walk this tightrope without destroying your own peace or your relationships, you have to shift from emotional reactivity to structured clarity, starting with a rigorous mental screening. Before a single dollar changes hands, you must put the request through the three default questions. Force yourself to look at the worst case scenario and decide if a default will ruin the relationship. If you can genuinely afford to instantly reframe the entire loan as a gift, and if your generosity is simply funding a cycle of bad behavior. If any of those answers make your stomach churn, the story should end before it even begins. If the request passes those initial test questions and you choose to move forward, you have to stop acting like a parent or friend and start acting like a legitimate bank. This means establishing a strict structure backed by assets that replaces vague promises with hard boundaries. If you're helping a child buy a car, for example, keep the vehicle's title firmly in your own name and set a clear, binding amortization schedule. Explicitly agree from day one that if a payment is 30 days late, you will repossess the car. It sounds harsh, but setting those high standards protects your investment while giving the borrower a real world lesson in financial discipline. And finally, there will be times when the math simply doesn't work, and protecting your own retirement means you have to say no, a move that often comes with a heavy dose of family guilt. When faced with this awkward confrontation, your best strategy is to use a financial professional as your scapegoat. Go to your advisor or accountant, map out the reality of your goals, and let them officially advise you against the loan. This allows you to deliver the rejection without making it personal, using a bulletproof script that shifts the blame entirely. Your financial planner has locked down the budget to protect your retirement, turning an emotional family conflict into an absolute structural rule. Point 3, the silent minefield of unspoken rules. The biggest issue with informal lending isn't a lack of money, it's a lack of clarity. When a bank lends you money, everything, it's in black and white. You know the rate, the due date, and the consequences. But when you lend money to a sibling or a close friend, the terms are usually written in gray ink. The lender assumes one thing and the borrower assumes another. The lender thinks they'll pay me back as soon as they get their bonus. The borrower thinks they're doing well, they don't need this back right away, and that's where the friction builds. Suddenly, you see that family member posting pictures of a new vacation or a fancy dinner on social media, and a little voice in your head says, wait a minute, they can afford that, but they can't pay me back? Research from LendingTree showed that 36% of people who borrowed from loved ones reported feeling anxious or on edge nearly every single day because of the debt. It turns an equal relationship into a dynamic of debtor and collector. The very act of trying to save them from a traditional bank can trap both you in a frustrating cycle of guilt and silent judgment. So how do you go about eliminating these unspoken rules? Well, the first thing that you can do before a single dollar changes hands, write down the terms. It doesn't need to be a terrifying legal document, but it must explicitly state the exact loan amount, the repayment structure, and a final due date. Putting it in writing eliminates the dangerous guessing game of, I assume they'll pay me back soon, versus I assume they don't need it right away. Secondly, you can also take yourself out of the enforcement business. Agree on an automated or hands-off repayment method upfront, such as recurring monthly digital transfers or a calendar set schedule. By outsourcing the reminders to technology, you protect the equal dynamic of your relationship and avoid the anxiety of having to awkwardly bring up debt during casual hangouts. Lastly, perform a mental gut check before even thinking about lending. If seeing them spend money on themselves while owing you will breed resentment, you have two choices. Either explicitly agree upfront that their lifestyle choices are none of your business, or reframe the loan as a financial gift. If you can afford to give the money away with zero expectation of return, you completely bypass the debtor-collector trap and save the relationship from daily anxiety. Generosity doesn't mean having zero boundaries. In fact, the strongest relationships are the ones where boundaries are respected. Lending money to a loved one or splitting shared bills shouldn't feel like a high-stakes gamble. The most resilient families and friendships aren't the ones that ignore financial realities. They are the ones who stay open, stay clear, and recognize that a boundary isn't a wall to keep people out. It's a fence to keep the relationship safe. That's not being selfish. That is just good stewardship. If you found your own financial goals getting sidetracked because you're constantly playing the role of the family bank, or if you're trying to figure out how to balance family loyalty with your own retirement security, let's talk. Because your financial plan shouldn't have to break under the weight of your relationships. At Midland Financial, we help you align your money with your values, establishing the kind of clarity and structure that protects both your future and your family peace. If you're ready to build a financial roadmap with strong, intentional boundaries, we invite you to reach out to us at Midland Financial to start a conversation. If you found this episode valuable, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more insights on planning with intention. I'm Larry Sprung with Midland Financial, where we strive to bring joy to your money journey. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.